Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Crucible Conversations for Curious. I'm here today with AJ. We met on Facebook a couple of months ago, and he has got an incredible story. But more importantly than that, it's what he's doing now with his life, is why we've connected, why we are chatting, because this man has made sense of a lifetime which was a struggle, and he's come out the other side with some scars, like most of us, but he is able to shine and he is making something truly remarkable. So, AJ, tell me a little bit about your life. Let's start right at the beginning from day one.
Yes. So I was adopted. I don't know if you know that, but my father was an alcoholic. I was told later. My mother had some mental health challenges, and they were both amazing people at the same time. Of course, he was a sergeant in the military, um, and died when he was 43 in Germany during the Cold War. So I never got a chance to meet him, but I did meet my mother about 5 years ago. Tracked her down. And state laws changed, and the files became available to the public. But I went into an adopted family, like white middle class, up in Washington State, and I had three sisters, another adopted sister in that family, and we had a great life. I mean, I remember being taken to the mountains and rivers. My dad was a nature lover, introduced us to meditation, theater. It was a very arts and culture kind of upbringing. But, they lined us up when I was 8 years old, and sat us on a couch and told us that they were getting a divorce, which was, surprise to us kids because we had never seen them fight. I later realized that I grew up in a household where emotions were suppressed, from, the parental perspective, and, you know, that's been something that I think has made it challenging for me over the years. Just having to sort of relearn how to be in an emotional body in this lifetime. There's lots of other parts to that, which I'm sure have insights to as well. Childhood trauma and childhood neglect in some way. But, on a surface level, I was very fortunate. We had all the toys and, you know, wonderful Christmases and all that kind of thing. But I did miss that family structure when it broke apart at 8 years old. It was sort of the second wave after being adopted. I realized I was adopted at a young age and, I was different and I wasn't a natural born child. And then the family breaks apart again and it sort of is a second wound for a child. And, I went into, I guess, uh, a period probably from like 8 until I was 12 where I had lots of rage episodes and I would break all my BMX trophies from races I had won, biking with a baseball bat, my room. I remember that one day. I was just like, tear everything, I'd flip the table, kind of stuff, right? I didn't know how to, again, process emotions, right? So I'd get bottled up and I think all the fear and the stress and the uncertainty of, being in this a family dynamic, and having, whatever things I was preloaded with, coming from a father who was an alcoholic and a mother with mental health stuff. That's just how it showed up. And, it wasn't long after that, into like 13, 14, 15, where, I became unbearable, to both of those parents. I was stay with my father for a while. He would pass me off to my mother because he couldn't handle me. She would you know, deal with me for a while and pass me back to my father. I was like a hot potato nobody wanted, right? I was loved, but they just didn't know what to do with me and had limited parenting skills, as many parents do. It's completely understandable. I you know, came home at 14 after, doing a bunch of stuff I shouldn't have done. I mean, I threw a big party at the house, when my parents were out of town. Uh, like half the high school came and tore the house to shreds and, you know, like, took the car without I didn't have a driver's license, and it was just the straw that broke the camel's back, and, came back home with all of my stuff packed on the porch in a box, and that was it. The door was locked, and it was good luck, kid. And, um, you know, fortunately, I had, a best friend who, had a foster his parents, had foster license, and so they took me in to that next family, and that next family really became my rock. There was just a level of empathy and understanding and sort of cooler heads prevail mentality that they had. And that fact that I was friends with their son was a big deal because I went from having 3 sisters to having a brother, and I really needed that brother, and I really needed those cool heads at that time. And they were the Kool-Aid family, all the kids in the neighborhood would come over to their house. There was always sodas, you know, things to do, and, they were just very, they were the kind of people that, like, walk the talk, they don't talk about God or, spirituality or religion, they just live it, and in their actions, and very, very just loving, salt of the earth kind of people, and that was a great experience for me. But, that's a snapshot of kind of right up until, my high school days, I guess, end of high school.
It's quite traumatic, but that must have really made you wonder why it happened and how it happened, and I guess it probably triggered some self-worth and really what is life all about?
Okay.
So how did you feel when you moved in with your best mate and his parents? How did that differential, having a brother rather than sisters, what difference did that make to your life?
I mean, it was just a soft landing. I was coming from a situation where I had parents that didn't want me anymore, couldn't handle me, and, I think, l coming into a situation where, you know, we would love to have you know, let us set up an extra bed for you. You know what I mean? You know, we love you. Like that was such a frontal shift from, you know, my mother's, boyfriend holding me in a full Nelson while she slapped me or my dad sort of wrestling me to the ground, in the backyard, arguing with him, kind of thing, and just those feelings of just feeling like this is unworkable. My life is unworkable. I'm unlovable. I think coming into a situation that was the opposite of that was life changing.
So how did that then, um so what age were you when did you join that the oh, so what age were you when you joined your new family, and how did that impact your school life and growing up from there?
Well, that's a great question. I was like 14, 15, and I think it was my freshman year in high school. Not only did they take me in, they took in another boy at the time who is my other brother, Miley. And so I had two brothers actually. And, we ran, we were thick as thieves through high school. I mean, we were the Three Musketeers. There was a lot of beer. There was a lot of antics and, acting out. I mean, we were probably way too handsome. As young men and, leaned into that way too much. And, it was just it was girls, beer, and rock and roll, through high school. We were good guys, but we didn't know any limits when it came to having fun. I think you know, that was a setup for what was to come. Yeah. But we were fortunate to have, Bob and Ruby as, our parents, and what they provided for us probably saved all of our lives.
Sounds like they were a remarkable pair of people. I
Yep.
remember seeing on your as I remember seeing on your Facebook page that you there a picture of Ruby, and you could just see that love and compassion, that the memories that you guys had from growing up and things.
I mean,
So
look, I acknowledge all of those who brought me into this world, from my adopted parents to my, biological parents. Everyone has had given me so much, obviously, you know, I have Bob and Ruby, oh, I feel are foundational in the work that I do today, that their teachings and their love is foundational in the work that I do and the way that I view the world and, the level of altruism, that I aspire to for sure.
yes, yeah. So take me forward a few years. You're now in high school, and like all boys, you're young, you're good looking, the beer flows, and as you said, there's no limits. I remember that it's fond. It's a fond memory of drinking too much and having fun and occasionally throwing up and whatever. It's seemingly harmless, and you're invincible, aren't you, when you're in your late teens and things like that?
This is a part of our culture, right? I think not just in America, but globally, this sort of coming of age youth integration with alcohol, with substances, with these things that, a lot of recovering addicts will talk about, their belief that alcohol and drugs saved them, at a certain point, and then it was what killed them. It's began to kill them at a certain point. And so, you know, I do think I do think there is probably some truth in that for me in those early years, and that I was, that rage might be someplace to look, right? And then, just that those tools that I was missing, in my toolkit to process, what was happening internally. And I think some of it just got suppressed and pushed underneath. It was replaced with those good times, right? And seeking that euphoria, seeking that belonging, seeking that all these things that we find through this culture of using, imbibing, right? And we see it everywhere, right? It's very prominent in Western culture and a lot of cultures, but the bars are full. You know, That's people grind during the week and they go out and they drink and use on the weekends and it's like there's a cost and an impact for that, that I found in my life personally that didn't work any longer and for yourself as well, right? And so many blessings have come from, my journey into recovery, but it got darker before it got better for sure, and from the time that I left high school, which I dropped out my senior year, moved to Hollywood, um, and, you know, I wasn't addressing that big wave that was growing behind me, the monster, right? That would someday, tackle me and bring me to my knees. And, you know, I had dreams and aspirations when I got to Hollywood. I got into acting. I, started writing. I did stand up for a while. And, you know, it continued to progress like our disease does. And I found myself, within that first 10 years in my 20s in Los Angeles, you know, waking up in, motels on Sunset Boulevard, with people I didn't know and, like kiting checks, at the bank, doing things that I wouldn't normally do and ending up in places I wouldn't normally end up and having consequences that were continuing to stack up in intensity and consequence. And, it was like, I think 2000, right around 2000, um, you know, everything fell out, from under me. And that was the beginning to becoming homeless. I couldn't hang on anymore to this double life, trying to hide my addiction, to my mainstream kind of normie friends, and I was trying to show I sold a screenplay towards the end of that decade and blew all the money and ended up bitter and resentful and addicted and it just all went down the drain, um, in a very sad way. Those next 3 years, would really be a defining time, for me on the streets in San Francisco.
That's what happens though, doesn't it? It takes a series of events, and each one knocks you down, and it gets more and more difficult to climb back up.
Mhm.
I hear when it comes to the addiction, it does save people's lives for a while. It's a crutch, and it stops you breaking because you've got that thing to lean on. But as you said, it begins to break. It begins to impact your body.
There I think you're asking, was I aware that there was a problem that was not being addressed before I was forced to address it?
Exactly that. Thinking it's difficult to think back, but were you aware of? I have got the mother of all hangovers, and
Yes.
it's only Tuesday,
Yeah.
and I had one on Monday.
You know, like, I remember, like, I would go and give blood, donate blood, and they would pay you for that, $40 or something back in the day. And then I would take a dollar or 2 of that and go buy a 7-Eleven hot dog, and maybe like a candy bar. And I would take the other, money and I would go buy crack cocaine. And it occurred to me that I was literally, like, selling my internal fluids, my blood, for drugs, And it just I knew I was doing it. I couldn't stop doing it, but I was aware of how insane that was, right? Like, I'm homeless, I'm selling my blood, and I'm smoking crack with the money, and barely feeding myself. So this is the disease of addiction. This is why they call it a disease, in my opinion, is because it's progressive and it mimics diseases like cancer that are destroying us, literally like taking over our body, destroying our minds, killing us, and there's some driver of that, and that is, this still very misunderstood concept of addiction and alcoholism. It's not moral, it's like very good people, from moms, you know, to community leaders, veterans, you know, are struggling in this country with this disease, and it's eating them alive, literally like it was eating me alive at that time when I was, you know,
You mentioned one really crucial thing there, and that was moral. I lost my moral compass. I did not know what was right, what was wrong, what was okay and what wasn't. And you said you've got those mums, those dads, you've got business people, you've got anybody taking drugs, drinking, and madness. But they
yeah,
cannot connect the fact that that is madness because it's just routine. It is just normal. Um, and it is really, really tough to be able to join those dots because, as you said, your moral compass has gone awry, and it's normalized. You've normalized that chaos, and it's very difficult to appreciate that and then go step back and, hey, what's gone wrong?
exactly. Then I think one of the critical pieces, for me and for others that I've talked to was dealing with this shame piece, and dealing with this guilt piece in the journey of healing, right? And so for many people, not just addicts and alcoholics, I think, we behave in certain ways in our lifetime, and ultimately we get to these new vantage points, right? And then we are able to turn around and look at, see where we've traveled. And for myself, when I was able to get sober and find that new vantage point and turn around, what I saw was horrifying, right? And I had so much judgment of myself and so much shame, and I couldn't forgive myself for the things, that I was pointing to, saying, bad person, bad guy, look at you, unlovable, unworthy, look what you did. And I think it's incredibly important, for we as addicts to continue to work on that piece and to teach that piece to people who are just beginning their journey of transformation around drugs and alcohol, because I have a friend, he'd spent a large percentage of his life in prison, and I asked him, like, "What's the number one thing, for you that you know, see that has been a blocker for you, in your journey?" He said, "Shame," you know? And went for myself, when the shame piece is there, how does that show up? Well, it shows up, it keeps me from going to coffee with somebody, and sitting down and being vulnerable and having a conversation because I'm just like, I'm ashamed, right? I'm ashamed. I don't want to reveal myself. I don't want to put myself in a position where I might have to reveal myself. I don't want to raise my hand at that meeting because I'm ashamed of myself. I feel guilty. I feel unworthy. I feel unlovable, and so it's just a blocker in so many areas that are so important to transformation that it's almost one of the first pieces I think that should be addressed in recovery, or therapy when people are coming off the streets. 'Cause there's a lot of stuff that happens out there, that isn't who people are, but and I'll just keep it on homelessness. It's like once you lose everything or you lose enough to end up on the streets, you're in a traumatic situation. Boom, day one. It's like you just stepped into a new dimension of reality where you are forced into primal living, right? Primal thinking. You are forced into your animal instincts, right? To survive, it is very understandable that you would look for some kind of substance or some kind of medical medicine to deal with the spikes of trauma, the spikes of fear, the spikes of loneliness, that are now part of your existence. And so if you're not a drug addict when you get to the streets, you probably are in the high 90%, you know, range of becoming one very quickly. And if you do, and as you do, or even if you don't, you're 100% going to fall into animalistic sort of primal mindsets from time to time, if not all the time. And there, it's like, you know, you do what you have to survive, period, and anyone would. Not that people are bad, not that I was bad, on the streets, but to say that it's understandable, it's excusable even, and it's critical to forgive ourselves for that, if we are coming from that place. Because I do deeply believe that anyone would fall into that. And I will say some people, is very rare from my experience, end up on the streets and they are just gentlemen and they are ladies and they seem unaffected by it all. And those people that I've met that are able to achieve that have a very, very strong faith. They have some kind of relationship to God, or they have some kind of toolkit that they had before they ended up in that situation that allows them to process through those intense experiences, right? But I would say that those are far and few between from all the work that I've done and doing outreach, and being on the streets, and being homeless myself. I would love to see more people who are navigating homelessness have those tools and that level of faith so that they can more quickly adapt or get off the streets, depending on what they want to do. But it's rare, and we don't teach those things to people who are in those situations. We don't bring that technology to them. We don't, you know, the Brene Browns and Tony Robbins and workshops and, you know, men's groups and all that kind of stuff. It's just generally available or marketed to kind of middle management executives, mid-level executives, that can afford it, or poor communities don't have access to the quality personal transformation, personal growth sector because it's expensive. You know, what's the ROI on like taking that to the streets and teaching people in shelters? And it's like nobody, people don't see a return on investment. I do personally, and that's the work that I'm invested in. Is like how do I take the things that have helped me and others that I know, from 12 step to landmark to science of mind to whatever, yoga, meditation, list goes on. Like, how do we take that, put it into a triage sort of toolkit and deploy it, across the country in places where people are really suffering and actually probably need it the most, right?
I'm looking forward to you tell me a little bit more about your outreach and what you're doing, because I know that's a remarkable part of your life. I want to just go back to, as you said, you're on people on the streets. There's all that shame. My comprehension of shame is every moment we're living, we are doing the best that we can. You're on the streets, you're in survival mode, you've got to steal some food. You're stealing that food to keep yourself alive. It's not good behavior, but it's understandable, as you said. Um, and for me, the only way I could mitigate shame was realize that everything I did wasn't okay. It was protecting me. I was doing the best I could. And that probably was the most important way I managed to navigate my way out into sobriety and not falling back into drink, not falling back and relapsing, because I realized that, yeah, it wasn't good behavior, but I was doing my best, the best that I could. And
Mhm.
I think you've nailed it there. Showing people, giving them that toolkit. Hey, look, you are doing the best that you can. Yes. So I'm pretty sure that the most powerful aid that took me out of addiction and into recovery was understanding that I'm doing the best that I could. The behavior wasn't okay, but Hamish is a person. He wasn't a bad person. He was in survival mode.
What I can say is I think that you're absolutely right in that we need to help people, I believe, and the public begin to find workarounds for this reactive sort of judgmental kind of way that we interpret and work with behaviors that are, unwholesome or unproductive or self-harming or destructive otherwise that happen when people are in high stress situations or homelessness or addiction, mental health challenges, things like this. Yes, no. First of all, like we're not promoting bad behavior at all. But what I'm saying is it's been incredibly powerful for me to have people see me and acknowledge me despite those mistakes, that I've made, right? And those wrongdoings that I have done, right? I mean, I'm not trying to say that there aren't things that are wrong or bad that I've done or that other people do. I'm just saying it's incredibly powerful medicine when someone steps forward and sees through that and sees the essence of who you are and speaks into your possibility as a human being and your beauty, and your potential, right? Because it can kind of like help those things fall away. And as they fall away, you begin to have less attachment to them, and as you begin to have less attachment to them, you begin to have a clearing for healing, which is ultimately what we want, is to move people away from these things, right? And so the judgment mind, the critical mind, the self-loathing mind, it just becomes very dense and unhelpful in terms of like getting to the net of what we really want, which is like healing and transformation, and I think for like people on the outside who just look at, people on the streets and go, oh, they're dirty, they litter, they're doing drugs, they're, oh, look, they robbed that CVS store or whatever. It's like try and crack below the surface of that a little bit more or a lot more to see that they're just like you. It's circumstantial what's happening. And the rebuild that's really critical if you want to participate in that as someone looking in from the outside is to begin to see these people and speak to these people as their possibility, as their divine essence, as their golden potential, right? To rise through these things. Because it's not just critical for them, it's critical for all of us. I think we need to come to a new relationship around um, the way that we're holding this homeless situation, the people caught up in it, in the process of healing. And it's going to begin with like kind of leveling the playing field in terms of like removing judgment, removing biases.
Tell me a little bit about the experiences you had on the streets, because when last we spoke, you gave some detail into places and situations, and just that being caught in that wave where it's almost impossible to get out, because I think that's the scary bit. You become embroiled in somewhere where it just seems hopeless.
There was a guy that came up to me, and it was like maybe like my 3rd year of being on the streets. I was shot out in a week, and he used the word devastated. He took a look at me and he just said, "Wow, just devastated." And that always stuck with me because I was completely, utterly devastated by the situation of becoming homeless, through my experience of becoming homeless and addicted on the streets. And I don't think that I believed that it was possible for me to ever get out of that situation or change. At that point, I had no vision, you know, of a future where I would become a nonprofit founder or community, you know, activist or advocate or whatever, like sober. It's a hard life on the streets, not having shelter, no refuge from the elements. I felt a million miles away from this tender warmth of life. I remember one time I would just walking all night and eating out of garbage cans, in these like kind of nice residential neighborhood, you know, kind of looking into the window and seeing this family having dinner together, the kids, you know, what happened to me? How did I end up here? And, you know, when you're on the streets, it's true, you are kind of invisible. You get this feeling that people just don't care or see you. People are wrapped up in their, 9 to 5 life and, their whatever, dramas of their lives. And once in a while, someone steps out of the crowd, and takes on this angelic quality and speaks to you, and it's really powerful. And I'll never forget some of those moments when that happened. Sort of like these guideposts, that kept me going. But I don't know if that answered your question.
I think absolutely. I think you've painted a painting of despair, of, as you said, of desperation, of no hope. Um, and yeah, I mean, I cannot comprehend it. Absolutely cannot begin to. Um, so how did you manage to get out of that? Because as you said, it's almost like going down a funnel where you've got to climb up a drain pipe that's covered in oil. How did you get out of that space?
Yeah, well, I mean, first I want to just add to that, there's a spectrum of experiences that people have, while navigating homelessness, but despair is certainly common and prevalent. You know, I had it bad, but like I've seen so many people that have had it so much worse. I mean, little kids literally out there smoking fentanyl, 13 years old, being trafficked, sex trafficked, you know, you know, disabled people who are just, like, and people with mental health issues who are literally like just going through this revolving door at the hospitals where they take them in for, you know, 6 hours and then just put them back out, knowing full well that these people do not have the capacity to think straight, take care of themselves. And when I'm doing outreach work, sometimes, I'll meet someone, like down the alley, around the corner, behind the dumpster, and they are just bring tears to your eyes immediately and you see them, because they are truly devastated. This speaks to me, this drives me in this work, because I am one of those people. Um, and, somehow I've been able to like be cleaned up and, have a life again. And I just believe that it's possible for everyone. There is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now is part of our literature in AA and 12-step recovery. And this is, when I talk about how I got off the streets, and the things that have helped me, I mean, God is at the top of the food chain. It's my relationship with a higher power, that I choose to call God. source, universe, my real, sort of, you know, like universal term is it's just love, right? It's just I connect to some power of love in this universe that seems to know me and respond to my prayers and helps me when I pause and kind of lean back into it and gives me guidance. And so I think that's critical, while you're on the streets is to try and find some relationship with something greater than yourself that loves you. And definitely, like recovery is hard work, right? It's fucking brutal, It's like this is the work of like pivoting, right? And like looking at the beast, right? Looking at the dragons at the doors of the cave which you fear to enter, right? Which is yourself, your hero's journey, right? And so I'm a finite man. I realize that you know, I'm not God. And so, leaning on this faith and this process of learning what that can mean for me in this lifetime is essential. And I like all, like I was raised Christian, I have a LGBT sister who's a minister. My dad, went from Christian to atheist to Muslim at the end of his life. I mean, I have so much diversity, in my family alone, so I'm not, like particular about, I don't judge. I think we can learn from all faiths, Native American, Buddhist, whether you're Muslim. I think love is really you know, the medicine in all of those, you know, religions and ways that we want to look at higher powers or something greater.
I think that is really important because love brings in forgiveness. It brings in new chances, new opportunities, um, and with that capacity to forgive yourself and learn to love yourself, you're letting go of all that stuff. You're letting go of the past, and the concept of a higher power, I think, is really important. I didn't appreciate it in AA because it wasn't my time, but I found my own sense of spirituality, and it's not, oh, please help me, I can't do anything. It's just an understanding that you're not alone. There is something looking out for you, and being able to pause, as you said, and you get a sense of ideas and hope, and there is hope because there is. You just have to listen for it, look out for it. So how did you manage to cope with that transition to rebuilding your life and start basically living a lifestyle as a coping human being, as a thriving human being, maybe?
Yeah, that's a great question. This is, what I'm hoping to explore and share in this whole TV series that we're doing, Our People Rise. Um, you know, over the 10, 15 years, from the time I sort of, realized I have to change, right? I'm going to die in the streets like a dog if I don't change, to, sort of like where I would say I kind of got to a baseline, that took a good 10, 15 years, right? But it started with, like acceptance or surrender, we talk about, in recovery, which is like, it's like we're sick and tired of being sick and tired, right? And we have to admit to our innermost selves, that we were addicts or that it's not working, or that I'm licked. I'm not going to be able to do this my own way, do life the way I'm doing it, right? And so that's like an inflection point, that's critical. I think it was for me, and is for everybody. It's like we don't change until we realize that we have to, or need to, or we're going to. But you know, moving forward, I already mentioned like establishing some kind of higher power relationship with a higher power was critical. It's like for me, it was like God help me. You know what I mean? I did throw up my arms and scream to the heavens. but I found 12-step recovery, early on, and that gave me an opportunity to, get in the middle of the pack, I guess, is, a way to say it. That's said in the circles of AA, 12-step, and that's just like, I can't do it alone, right? I'm not gonna make this journey ahead, you know, without a band of brothers around me or, a community, and so that was critical. Recovery and personal growth practices, um, saved my life. I was very fortunate to have a friend living in Northern California that I reconnected with shortly after uh, I got off the streets and sort of got into recovery. And he was involved in, the human potential movement. It's very popular in Northern California. There's a lot of gurus and teachers, and he started to, you know, feed me these little golden nuggets of teachings. Started with sort of giving me this template for the hero's journey and helping me to kind of understand Joseph Campbell's model of how our hero goes in on this journey, and then is forced to go into the cave and past the dragons and come out with the medicine. And this initiation separation or separation initiation and return model kind of. And beyond that, I got involved with landmark education, which was a wonderful experience, and they really helped me to see through my limiting beliefs that I was holding on to that were keeping me back from they've got a great diagram, that is, it's like a pie and it says, this is everything you know. It's a very small piece of pie. Next to that small piece, this is everything that you don't know in life, and then there's the massive, like 88% of the pie, which is what you don't know that you don't even know. Right. And that was an aha moment for me in Landmark. And I was like, oh crap, I don't know shit. But I'm living my life as though I do, and that's creating problems, right? Because my future is full of limitations when it should actually be empty, right? And clear for creating new possibilities for myself. And the limitations that are existing when I look into my future are from my past experiences. So I had to, get help. Landmark helped me to go back and understand that, a lot of these blockers that I was dealing with were just made up of stories about events that happened in my life that I made up at the time with the limited toolkit that I had, right? Had a traumatic experience. I made up a story. I was unlovable because that's what I had in my toolkit. You know, I was, kicked out by my father. I made up a story. He didn't love me, carried that broom. And all of these stories that I made up became drivers inside me, driving my thinking, driving my behavior, driving my fears. Back to 12-step recovery, some of the stuff in the 4-step inventory have helped me to understand my fears and get in touch with those. And the list goes on and on. My point is that I was lucky. I was fortunate to get exposed to some really powerful technologies for transforming one's life, right? Where I think and I was open and willing to engage with them, right? But that friendship was foundational and instrumental, in the early days, and so I think everybody needs a friend, who's got like a toolkit, a really potent medicine to share, and to walk with that person during those formative years when they're just coming off the streets, they're just coming out of addiction. And A, we call it sponsor, landmark, it's a course leader, and the hero's journey, it's the teacher or whatever that comes in. And so, higher power of some kind, relationship with that, beginning to cultivate a community and getting in the middle of the pack, finding a great teacher, these have all been things that have really served me well. And I'll just add this and I'll shut up for a second. But another thing that I was very lucky and fortunate to get involved with at an early point after getting off the streets, and I was traumatized. Had mental health issues. I was, like anxiety, PTSD. Somehow I wandered into a soup kitchen and asked for a volunteer job, and they let me, stack chairs and tables and wash dishes. But I had such a sense of purpose, and such a like service is such a powerful medicine that if you can get into service, I believe as early as possible in your recovery journey from whatever it is, it's just you get back so much more than you give.
It is service in any way, and that, as you said, that helps you feel I've done something. I've made a difference for somebody, and that building of a little bit of self esteem, a little bit of self respect,
Mhm.
it is so powerful. Yeah, and little by little, you start trusting yourself, and people give you a bit more responsibility, and it's yeah. But you've had to surrender. You've had to say, I can't do this. You've had to put your hand up and say, I need help. That is the scary bit, isn't it? That is probably one of the hardest things to do until you've done it. And then that's the easiest bit. It's the journey in recovery is a yo-yo. It's up and down. It's scary. It's frightening and things like that.
I think I love that, and I think that, what comes up for me is, like, this sense that would be devastated or not just devastated, but destroyed, you know what I mean, in some way, like, my arms and legs would, like, literally fall from my body, and I would, like, be a pile of nothing on the floor if I got vulnerable, got honest, and let people see what was actually going on inside of me, It's like I had such a story that to sort of turn myself inside out in a group setting or with a therapist or even with myself in the mirror meant annihilation. But I think that, this capacity to continue to do that, to throw ourselves over the lines that we've drawn in the sand where we've said, I won't do that. I can't do that. You know what I mean? In the direction of failing forward towards personal growth, like that spirit, is it's such a great tool. It's a very simple, blunt tool, but sometimes you just have to grab yourself by the seat of your pants, on the top of your shirt, just say, no, you're going in to this next iteration of yourself. And that is going to be a type of annihilation. And you have to embrace that, because sometimes it's in that busting ourselves apart that we get the opportunity to put ourselves back together stronger.
And that completely reminds me of the shamanic bone dance that we do.
Mm,
It's a journey of nothing more complicated than allowing your body to break apart, to dissolve, to wash away, to break up everything, all that annihilation, all that is gone, all the old stuff, wash it all away, and then get rebuilt. And it's a really powerful shamanic journey. I love doing it. It's tremendously healing. You're daring to be vulnerable. I would hazard a guess nobody has died from vulnerability, from
mm.
going, I can't do this anymore and saying I need help and stepping forwards.
25 years later, after that experience on the streets in San Francisco, where I was completely devastated, that am still dealing with trauma today. I'm still unpacking wounds. I am still, and I thought for sure by now I would have been, like on easy street. Just this gleaming example of like transformation, but it's like, what got me from there to here isn't going to get me from here to there. Right. And there's further to go. The mountain range continues in this lifetime. And I'm working on vulnerability issues today too. I'm working on issues around men right now, and realizing that some of the wounds I experienced in my childhood with my father, are still, you know, present and with other men in my life. I experienced sexual assault when I was homeless on the streets, and I haven't, really unpacked that. I've done a lot of therapy, but there's more to go. And I think what happens is, like I have a very old habit that exists today of like tidying up my room like I did before this interview, and sweeping the clothes under the bed, just pulling it down just enough so that you can't see the edges, because I'm a busy guy, right? I got to make money. I'm shaking and moving, trying to have a successful life. But, you know, that habit has to constantly be checked, you know, and one of my new prayers is, you know, God help me check myself, you know, just check me, God, you know what I mean? Because, you know, before I wreck myself, you know, because it's really easy in this world of distraction to just, you know, as much work as we do and as hard as we work, you know, there's no credits, you know, it's like each day is really truly a new day, you know, with a new responsibility to, you know, do all of the things that you have to do to maintain your internal household and your mind and, you know, all of these great lessons and teachings can just fly out the freaking door in any second. I could be right back there with a needle in my arm, you know, if I don't careful. That's just the truth.
That's the scary bit, isn't it? We as addicts, ex-addicts know that drugs work. We know that alcohol works. We know it will just take that edge away. We also know it is very fucking hard to get back from that state. And
Mhm.
that's the scary bit. It's very easy to tumble back down to
Yeah.
being in that area where I can't cope anymore. I know what will help.
It's like, what do you do when you just like stop giving a shit? You know what I mean? Like whatever happens in your life occurs and what you're left with is like, I don't care anymore. Because if you get to I don't care anymore, none of your tools and teachings are gonna freaking matter because you're not gonna give a fuck to you're not gonna wanna use them. So that's a very dangerous place for me to arrive at. I have to be very careful, um, that I don't get there and keep people in my life, and kids in my life that I love and my family and all of these things, purpose is really important. I feel to stay on track and keep doing the right thing, something to believe in this big crazy world, because there's a lot of chaos going on. And I like to help people find their purpose. I feel like the experiences that I've gone through, in this last, uh, you know, 2 years of, like I lost my job at the end of COVID and I really had to do some soul searching and figure out what I wanted to do to move forward. And the dots connected. And I think that, for me, I caught on fire, in that moment for this TV series and this new nonprofit, Our People Rise. And, it was all like percolating, over the last 10 years, while I was, doing a lot of work in Silicon Valley and just kind of feeling like I'm not in my purpose, like I was trying to be, making an impact. I was learning a lot about innovation and these really important things that I'm using now for developing this new company and this new nonprofit. When the dots connect, and dots for me are like what is the one thing that you have to do that you would have to do if, in your life, if, you only had a year left to live, you know what I mean? Like what would be the most important thing for you? And and for me, it was like making a contribution to society, paying it forward, giving it back with everything, 100% full court press, standing next to my higher power side, just saying, let me run the ball, throw me a pass, scoring touchdowns for humanity. Right. And then I think the second thing was like really getting uh, an understanding of like what my skill sets are and what I love to do. Right. And then I think the third was, just looking at my resources and, what I had around me that I could pull together to make it happen. Right. But But when the dots connect, for people, I just think that there's this ignition that happens, and it's like something comes alive and something takes the wheel, and it can't be stopped. It is an invigorating, infectious, it is an invigorating energy that has so much power. It can just blow through walls.
I think this is a great chance where we can jump into you telling me more about the your nonprofit and the Our People Rise. Before we go into that, those guys of you who are watching this on YouTube, you're now going to get a great clip and see what AJ does, see his passion and how he presents giving back and bringing hope to people. It's absolutely beautiful. Those guys who are listening, you'll get to listen to it, but the link for the video is in the notes, so I highly recommend you jump in and watch the video. So AJ, we've just seen we've just seen that clip, and tell me about your inspiration for Our People Rise, what your vision is, what your dream is, and tell me how it's actually coming together.
So Our People Rise is a concept for a TV series that we are making, stories of human resilience. We're asking the question, what is it in our human DNA that allows us to rise up in the face of hardship, struggles like homelessness, addiction, and mental health? I'm the host and traveling across the country, interviewing Americans and asking them these questions. The inspiration for this was my desire to create a series that I could take into prisons and shelters, treatment centers, hospitals, colleges, and speak with panels of people who have managed to get to the other side of the minefield in these sort of pillar issues and have desire to that together we can share the tools that we use to help us get there with people who are really needing the inspiration to believe and to hear these tools and have some access to them. And so that's really it. The foundation of the project is it's a service project with the intention of taking these messages to the hardest hit places in the country and providing inspiration and hope for people. And then aside from the series is the nonprofit Our People Rise, and that will be a foundation that is focused on teaching core tools for transformation to impacted communities in the area of homelessness, mental health, and addiction. And these tools, I mean, I mentioned a few, but it'll be an ongoing combined effort of a core mastermind and a community and an alliance of organizations that are all working together to really understand what the blockers and pain points are for people who are just beginning to rise up from these devastating situations so that we can solve for those problems with like the latest and greatest technology that's out there being developed by some of the greatest minds on the planet to really help people hack their minds, get into the mechanics of what change looks like, and be able to get more traction so that we see these success rates in these programs across the country going up. And so my personal perspective is and experience is that if we look at the adventurer, like a diagram, and the adventurer is going on, this adventure across the mountain range, right? Like, what is the walking stick? What are the binoculars? What are the tools that the adventurer has, that are going to help them to navigate the terrain ahead, right? Because even as we offer these programs like 12-step recovery or healing from trauma or housing programs, addiction programs, that governments are laying out for people. I feel like if you don't have the toolkit to like navigate through those programs and those offerings, you're going to get turned around and you're going to go back out to what you know and potentially use or die, right? And because I was given some of these tools, you know, from my friend and from some of these programs early on, I was better able to navigate through some of these programs and, from someone who was seriously sick and able to be successful. And so the goal of the series is just to arm people with better toolkits to succeed along this, you know, very difficult and challenging journey of recovery you know, from these things. And I'm extremely passionate about, just the outliers, the people that, society has given up on and going after that demographic and loving them, like my foster parents loved me and really delivering them the quality of education and information that they deserve. Um, the days of going into a hospital after overdosing, and some social worker handing you 3 pieces of wrinkled paper that are stapled together and saying, "Good luck, call these numbers," and nobody answering or need to be over. It's not acceptable. When I see people on the streets, I see future nonprofit leaders. I see, future teachers, parents, taking the head of their family again, resuming their.
I've got goosebumps. I think you're empowering people. As you said, that piece of paper is giving them a fish. You're teaching them to fish. You're giving people hope and opportunity. And that, that can only come from everything that you have done. As you were talking then, I was joining the dots. AJ experienced all sorts of stuff growing up, went into Hollywood. He can write a script. He knows how to make a movie. He knows how to tell a story. You then tumbled back down again to learn a bit more. You've done all the technology, so you know all of this. Everything you have been through in your life has said, right, now you have all the tools you need to do exactly what your vision and your purpose is. And I think that's what makes this so special. That's your guarantee this is going to work because you've lived every single bit of it. You've got all the tools you need to make this. It's empowering people and it's bringing hope, and that is magical. Really, really magical.
Thank you. Well, I feel like we are doing it. You're a part of my journey. I'm a part of yours in this moment. And, I think that there are a lot of people, kids, young people, older people who really want to see change on this planet. And I think that we have more tools at our disposal today through information sharing channels to educate each other. And I do see trends of young people, especially who are leaning into I don't know, higher consciousness or just wellness, uh, education, and I think that's really inspiring to me. Uh,
AJ, I know what you're doing is absolutely wonderful, and I'm going to support you the best I can. Where can all my listeners find out more about Our People Rise, your story, and what you're doing?
Yeah, ourpeoplerise.com. We are expressly interested in working with anybody who really cares about the homeless situation, mental health, and addiction in America and abroad. And yeah, I would love to talk to anyone who's wants to support that.
And then one last question. What is your superpower?
You asked me this last time. My superpower, I think I'm gonna say God. Or just like the willingness to like pray and listen and then try and act on that guidance is really, I think the greatest superpower that I've been humbled and, a God of my own understanding, which, is loving and more spiritual than religious for sure. And and exists in all of us.
I think that's the important bit. Is she ringing you?
It's God calling. All right. Hey, take this. No. I'm late for a meeting, but I thank you so much. I love you, brother.
I love you too. Thank you ever so much for being on the show, taking the time, and all the best. We will stay in touch.